All right, everyone, welcome to our Balancing Programming with Space Rentals webinar with guest presenter Angie Stellitano from the Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center in Toronto. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items to cover. One of them is we will be offering closed captioning throughout the webinar today. The closed captioning will be happening at the bottom of the screen where participants can change the font type, size, and color of the text. What I'd like to do now is just ask if a participant can confirm in the chat box that they can see the closed captioning box at the bottom of our meeting room. Can someone just type in a quick yes or no? Perfect. Okay, thank you, everybody. Great. So a record of the closed captioning will be sent to participants following the webinar and made available on our website. We will be recording the session as well, so we will be sending out that link to everyone following the webinar, and we'll be emailing out a quick survey as well with the recording. We ask you to complete the survey so we can continue to improve our learning series for arts facilities across Ontario and beyond. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. Your microphones have been disabled for this webinar, but you can use your speakers or headphones to listen in, and you can adjust the sound by clicking on the speaker icon at the top of the meeting. We will have roughly 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you might have. Please use the chat box in the bottom right to type in your questions, and we will get to as many as possible. So some introductions. My name is Alex Glass and I am the Program Manager at ArtsBuild Ontario. In case you have not heard of ArtsBuild, we are a nonprofit art service organization that provides tools, resources, and learning opportunities that help make Ontario's arts facilities more sustainable. One of our programs is the Learning Series, which is a series of webinars, workshops, and resources that support our core programs, which are Space Finder in Canada, the Arts Facilities Mentoring Network, Asset Planner for the Arts, and Energy Conservation. Our partners at Work and Culture have helped us to develop the Learning Series. Their mission is to support the people who work in the cultural sector through lifelong career development and business skills training. They connect, create, and curate training and tools that help arts and culture professionals develop the business skills to match their creative talents. So we'd like to extend a thank you for their partnership in the Learning Series as well. Our presenter today is Angie Stellitano, and she has been a member of the Miles Nadal JCC and Al Green Theatre team since the theater's opening in the fall of 2003. She has held many positions in her 14 years at the MNJCC, including front of house usher, supervisor, theater administrator, theater manager, and for the past 3 years served as the director of booking operations for the entire community center. Early in her career, Angie spent a few years working as a freelance stage manager for a number of Toronto-based theaters and producers, including Mirvish Productions, Marquee Entertainment, Toronto Operetta Theatre, and NNM Dance Theatre. Angie's ultimate commitment is to have others realize their passion and fulfill on their potential. As such, she has spent the past 4 years actively volunteering as a coach and mentor, and has led a talent management program at the Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center for the past year. So without further ado, I would like to turn things over to Angie to get us into our webinar today on balancing programming and space rentals. So,
thanks, Alex, and thanks ArtsBuild Ontario for inviting me back to host another learning series webinar and really allowing me to share some of the knowledge and experience that I've got to gain in my almost 15 years now at the Miles Nadal JCC and the Al Green Theatre. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a background on the organization for anybody who's not familiar. The Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center, or as we often refer to ourselves, the MNJCC, has welcomed over 2 million people to the corner of Bloor and Spadina in Toronto during the building's 60-plus year history. The changing makeup of our membership is really a testament not only to the vibrancy and diversity of the Annex neighborhood that we reside in, but to Toronto's own evolution. So we provide opportunities for people of all ages and backgrounds to be active, to learn, to connect, and to participate in a wide range of cultural experiences. So we're rooted in Jewish values, and the MNJCC is open to all. So we're home to 3,800 member state-of-the-art fitness center, our 285-seat Al Green Theatre, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second. We house 4 schools, 3 choirs, a wide range of arts and culture activities, Jewish life programming, and a really robust Active 55+ programming area. We're a founding member of the Bloor Street Cultural Corridor and the lead organizer of an annual Annex Family Festival. So our mission at the MNJCC is we strive to be an inclusive and welcoming hub for healthy and joyful community anchored in Jewish values where all downtown Toronto feel they belong. Okay, great. So I'll give you a bit now background on the Al Green Theatre. So as part of major renovations to the JCC, there was a vision to create a multi-use cultural arts facility in an already vibrant community center. So in October 2003, the Al Green Theatre opened its doors, and we've been serving a wide array of clients ever since. So the Al Green Theatre is a host to a number of cultural arts events, including theatre, music, dance, film, and literature. These events reach out to audiences of various ages, cultures, and demographics. Each year, we welcome over 25,000 people into the doors who are enjoying all the programming that we have on our stage. And really, for us in the theatre, we over the years really treated it as a business within a business. So we are very much, we're not a separate entity to the MNJCC, we're really a part of it. But really, we're looking a few years back to kind of give it a little bit more focus as its own business. And so we actually created our own little mission for the theatre itself. So a vibrant venue for arts and culture in the heart of Toronto, the Al Green Theatre provides a professional and supportive environment, empowering artists to engage diverse audiences. So I'll give you a little bit of my history now of the MNJCC. So you got some of it from Alex's intro. As she mentions, the theatre opened in October of 2003, which really marked the beginning of my journey here at the center. So my evolving career here is really a direct reflection of how the organization has grown and expanded and continues to do so. So we haven't actually mastered at the center a balance of our priorities of how we use the space, but we've come a very long way from where we started. So as the center has evolved, so has our ability to juggle the multiple priorities, both of our own programming and our need to serve the community and the rentals that we do take. So I'm going to try to outline the progress as I go through some of the examples throughout the presentation to kind of give you a sense of where we started and where we ended up, because you may fall anywhere on that scale, and just to know that you don't have to be starting where we've ended. It's taken at least my 15 years to get to that to that point. So we will have time for questions at the end, as Alex mentioned, but I do ask that if you have any burning questions about in the middle of the presentation, or if you need any clarification, or just would benefit from an extra example in a certain area, please, by all means, either raise your hand or use the chat box and ask, and I'll do my best to actually address those as we go. Okay, awesome. So, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to draw from examples from both the MNJCC and Al Green Theatre. Well, like I said, we're the same entity. We kind of operate a little bit differently when it comes to all of our programming. So as you can see, the number of the space use in the Milesville JCC in general, we're looking at about 70% of that being our own internal programming. About 25% of that includes our rentals. Within that 25%, I've also included, we have a couple of anchor tenants in the facility. So we have the Downtown Jewish Community School, which runs Wednesday evenings and Sundays throughout the school year, and it's a supplemental Jewish school, so similar to what a Sunday school would be. And then we have the Downtown Jewish Day School, which is a Monday to Friday full Jewish day school that runs from September to June each year. And then about 5% of what the space use is in the main part of the community center is as partners. The Al Green Theatre, as you can see, is a bit of a flip to that. So about 20% of what we use the space for is our own internal programming within the community center, and about 70% of what we do is rentals. and about 10% partners. I would say that the majority of that 10% of partners is actually kind of streaming directly from our rentals, actually, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So as you can see, these are obviously weighted very differently. And I want to give you some access to the processes and tools that we focus on for both internal programming and revenue generation through our rentals. So I'm going to go into that a bit. And so knowing that these numbers here for us are not a formula. So these aren't targets. They're not sales targets. It is actually just kind of what is happening for us right now in reality. So just to kind of give you a sense. Okay, great. So I'm going to poll the audience. So let's take a few minutes and see where the balance is currently for your organization. So if you can take a minute and type in the chat box, approximately what percentage of your overall space is being taken up by rentals? This is going to totally be a guess, I'm sure. You didn't get to pull numbers ahead of time like I did. But if you guys can give me a sense of like roughly what you're doing now. So Diane says 0. Nicholas is about 80%. Ooh, they're going fast and furious. Aaron's about 10%, 80%, 25, 50-50, still under construction, approximately 60%, 30%, 70%. It's great, we're really all across the board here. 20%. Let's see a couple more coming in. 2 large venues, 5%, small venue, and 60%. Great. No space yet, so 0%, 85%, 80%. Okay, great. So you guys have we've got a mix from like, you know, similar, we have a split kind of similar to what we're sort of dealing with here. You've gone from nothing really low to a really high percentage of what you guys are doing in terms of rentals, which is great to know. Okay, great. And so then I'm going to move on to the next question. And so based on what those numbers are, so do you think you're doing too many rentals, not enough rentals, or just the right balance for your organization of rentals to programming? So again, if you can just type in the chat box. Not enough, not enough, not enough, too many, yeah, not enough. More rentals, okay, great. Tough balance to reach. We want both to thrive. Yeah, I can relate to that one. Revenue expectations make me want more rentals. Yep. Been there before too. Great. Varies from year to year. Not enough, not enough. Yeah, not enough for board of directors directive. Yeah, great. I think we got a couple more coming in too. Inconsistent, but we need to keep the doors open. That's often the case, I think, for most people getting into the rentals. Yeah, managing the rentals leaves not enough time for program development. Absolutely, which is why here we are very, very fortunate that we actually have a completely separate bookings department that actually manages the space, manages having space be booked for all of our internal programs and taking all the rentals, so directly people managing that stuff. So we're actually one of the fortunate few organizations. I know that's not normally the case. Need to balance income with programming, for sure. Okay, great. So now that we have a sense of what you guys are doing and where you kind of want to be, we can take a look at how to find that right balance for your organization. So find the right balance. So there's bad news for those of you who are looking for a magic formula to actually come up with that thing. There is no formula. Okay, that's the bad news. But it's good news for those of you who don't really like rules and don't like to get stuck in too much structure, because again, there's no formula. So instead, I'm going to give you a bunch of, instead of giving you a bunch of rules, we're just going to follow, give you some guidelines that you can kind of work within and some tools that you can actually pick and choose from to kind of work for yourself, figure for yourself what's actually going to work for your organization. Okay, so foundation of balancing programming with rental space. So there's three main topics that we'll look at this afternoon. So the first one is how to use your mission as an anchor for balancing and assessing what rentals to take on and which ones not to. And the second one is we're going to creating policies and guidelines for you and your staff to provide structure so you can kind of work with it. And then implementing process for managing rentals and ensuring that you don't rent yourself out of your space that you'd like to be programming in. Sorry,
yeah, Angie, great. And I was trying to interrupt you before you started the slides. So, but Marianne just mentioned she's curious how you manage two departments and allocating time to the programming. So I think you're going to go.
Yeah, I won't go too deeply into that, but basically how we're structured here. So my department doesn't deal with the actual programming. So we're not creating the programs. We're not coming up, we're not like hiring people to lead the programs or like facilitators, any of that stuff. We have a whole programming department in various areas that manages all of that themselves. My department consists of myself as Director of Booking Operations. For sort of the theater side of it, in terms of like permanent full-time staff, we have a bookings coordinator dedicated to the theater itself, who takes all rental inquiries and takes in any other booking requests from all of our internal programmers, plops that into the booking system, takes all the information, works with them to like help realize their event, but we are not actually doing the programming. And also for the theater, we have a technical director who is responsible for managing the space and also working with both our internal programmers and our clients coming in to help meet their technical needs. For the rest of the community center, there is a number of cultural arts programmers, so programmers who are dealing with a variety of different adult programming. We've got Active 55 programming. We do a bunch of Jewish life programming. There is children's programming, you name it, we do it. And then we have, within our fitness center, there is a number of people who do programming within that. So they kind of do all that fun work in the background, and then we, as a department, just help them realize what they actually want to with their programs. We manage the space. So we manage making sure they have the space that they need, that they get the setups that they need to, all of that stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question, Marianne, but hopefully it does. So the programming department has to book time, and if so, is there a set percentage of dates, times that they have? Yes, they have to book times, and I'm going to get into that a little bit further into the presentation. I'm going to talk about what our process is for that. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, so looking at these three areas, so looking at mission, policy, and process as really some ways to kind of help find that balance for you. Really the main key that we always look at is communication and how that gets communicated across the board. It's the kind of make or break to have any of these three things work for you. And probably anything that you're doing in your operations, to be honest, but communication is key. Okay, great. So I'm going to take a bit of a look at mission now. So knowing your mission and ensuring your staff know your mission is really important in the process, really for running your organization, period. So your mission can be used as an anchor. It's a core of what you do as an organization, and it can really easily, you can really easily get caught up in the operations and lose sight, right, of what that mission is and what you're doing, whether that be with your rentals or whether it's with your own programming. So generally speaking, as an arts organization, your programming is going to be aligned or help fulfill on your mission, which you ultimately can actually have your rentals do the same. So they don't have to be separate, and we spent a long time here really drawing a hard line in the sand of this is our programming and these are our rentals, to the point where we didn't even, we used to struggle with our marketing department many years ago, that we wouldn't even be able to like help market some of our rental clients in the theater to like put the word out there because they weren't ours. Which is kind of crazy because the audience is coming in, they're ours, right? Regardless of who's actually producing the event, we really treat it as our audience. So we've come a long way there. But yeah, I really want to go back to, you know, fitting that into your mission. And, you know, I'll tell you something, this is not an area that we always excel at here. From an internal programming perspective, we sometimes suffer from mission creep, right? So the expanding of a project or a mission beyond the original goals, and all of a sudden you're like, why are we doing this? You take the big step back and go back to your mission. You're like, this actually maybe is a little bit aligned, but it's a bit of a stretch. So that for us, we're actually really starting to take a hard look at that because we're running out of space. We have a fair-sized facility, but we do so much here and really kind of have probably the equivalent of about 6 businesses within a business that we're trying to run. And so we're really working right now with our strategic plan to break down those silos and go back to some common goals so everybody's pulling back to what's the mission, what's the purpose, why are we here as an organization, and what are we doing? And I think when we get there and what we're working on is evaluation tools for ourselves, that will, I think, make a huge difference for us in the volume of programming that we're doing. Because a lot of programming doesn't necessarily mean that you're further moving your objectives forward. There's some stuff that we're doing that really doesn't have the results that we want, so we're diving into evaluation tools, which is something totally different, and definitely something I am not an expert in. But yeah, so basically from us, like running out of space, that's one of the ways that we can anchor that, is all constantly look back. Does this actually serve the mission? If there's not room for it, or if there's 2 things competing against each other, whether it's a rental and an internal programming or just internal programming versus internal programming, we try to use the mission to go back and say, okay, what's actually fulfilling on this, and what should we be doing, and what maybe we should set aside for now and look at later. So yeah, so you can really look to have your rentals do the same and pull that mission forward. So most organizations, when they're starting out, don't look at, oh great, we have the space and we can rent it out to outside groups, right? It's usually not part of the mission. So the Allegreen Theater is a great example of this. The theater didn't exist within the community center until major renovations that happened, and we opened in 2003. The vision for the theater before it opened was to be nothing but internal programming. Nobody really thought much about it as a pot. Like, I think they thought a little bit about, oh, we could maybe make a little bit of money, but really the thought would have been primarily, you know, back-to-back programs and this amazing space to do it. And then reality set in before the theater even opened, of like how many costs were associated with, you know, at the time, a state-of-the-art facility that, you know, that had a decent like operating costs and overhead and that kind of thing. So we were also seeing that there was a need in the community. There was a need for space, right? There was venues that people were dying for, and to be brought right into the community center, like a community center right downtown. I mean, we're on 2 subway lines, so it's really sought after. So quickly that started to shift, and we realized that we'd be fulfilling on mission and the need for actually, you know, paying for the theater to actually be in existence. We needed to start taking on some rentals. So it wasn't top of mind for sure. Great. So when considering taking on space rentals or assessing whether or not you should take on certain rentals, you can really use your mission as that tool, as a guide. So you want to be asking yourself a couple of things. One of them is, how can rentals enhance your mission? So perhaps it fulfills on part of what your mission is. And for us, opening up outside rentals really helps to support what our mission is, right? We strive to be an inclusive and welcoming hub. If we were a hub, we're going to be pulling in outside groups, right? We want everybody there. And, you know, where all downtown Toronto can feel they belong. So really opening up the doors even wider than they already are here is one way to do it. So how, and the other question you want to ask yourself is, how can rental support your mission? So having additional source of income obviously often helps that. Many of you guys know that because there's a lot of you who are doing like 70–80% of your time is being booked with outside rentals. So it can really help underwrite the important programming that you're doing, right, and support that. Probably one of the best things that we did, and I'll bring this back into the communication, we struggled up to a few years ago with feeling like it was competition. So, you know, Marianne asked a great question where it was like, oh, you have to book space. Yeah, our own programs have to book space because it's the only way that we know what to put in when. Our booking calendar looks a little bit ridiculous. If you look at any given room in a day, there's probably 4 or 5 things that are happening, with the theater excluded. So we really needed to kind of manage that. And sometimes it was feeling like, you know, our renters were actually working further ahead than our programmers were many moons ago. So they felt like for sure they were competing for space. So what we did is we were trying to figure out how do we break down that barrier, and how, for myself running the department, saying, you know, I've got numbers to meet, right? Somebody on here said that you're not doing, was it Catherine, that you're not doing enough for your board of directors, right? Enough rentals. So I have a certain amount that I need to bring into the bottom line running this department. We're seen as a revenue generating department. In the same way that our fundraising and development department is seen as a revenue generating department, or our fitness center is seen as a revenue generating department. So we were seeing these breakdowns across the board, either, you know, sibling rivalry, where it's, you know, this programmer is saying, well, how come fitness gets all of the marketing attention and we don't get as much? And, you know, there was not understanding what our fitness center actually was taxed with bringing in. And how come we're booking all of this stuff this far ahead for rentals when I need the space? Not really seeing what, as a bookings department, we were responsible for bringing in. So we decided, we brought all the programmers together, we brought all the support departments together, and we presented a high-level budget to everybody. So they actually understood what everybody's contribution was to the bottom line and everyone's reality. So as support departments, we could see what it was that the programmers were actually trying to cause and how much of the mission they were like really looking to push forward. And so the programmers could actually see, well, my program really either breaks even or doesn't make much money, or in some cases loses money, right? And if the impact is there, that's completely fine, but it has to get paid for somehow, right? We have overall operating expenses as an organization. So they really started to see, oh, I see. Oh, okay, I see what the rentals can bring in. And then they started to look at, oh, this is a really great audience to be tapping into. These are people we could be partnering with or reaching out to. They're bringing in people who normally wouldn't walk through the center. So that communication and opening that up changed the conversation. When we had to go to a programmer and ask a question of like, do you have any flexibility to actually move this program to a different time or a different room? We have X opportunity that's going to bring in this much money. The answer used to be like, no way. And now it's like, oh yeah, that's great. Actually, you know, can we try to promote to them, that kind of thing. So we've come leaps and bounds, but that level of communication there is really, really key for that. Excellent. Just trying to figure out where I am. So yeah, you want to really, you can take your mission, I'm going to move on from mission, but really your mission, you know, you can use that as your measuring stick of, you know, is this a rental that I want to be doing or not? Does it fulfill on it? Does it support it? And also, you know, can it increase your exposure, right? So having that new audience come into your facility can make a difference, right? It actually can increase how many people are participating in what you're doing as well. Okay, we'll move on to policy. So in addition to mission, a well thought out and communicated policy really can provide direction and structure, decreasing the risks of rentals overshadowing all of your own programming. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of some key policies around rentals that we have here that help support us in making sure that we don't let rentals take right over. So the first one is conflict of interest. Having a policy around conflict of interest is super important. You don't want to be bringing things in that are going to directly compete with what you're doing. So we don't accept any rentals that are considered in competition with anything that we do as a program. So for instance, if we had a rental inquiry come in that somebody wanted to run a preschool music program, the response would be, thank you so much for your inquiry. We actually have a program very similar to this and are unable to rent space to you for this. But if you have any other programming that falls outside of what we do that you'd like space for, by all means, please reach out to us again. We would love to host you. So we're not completely shutting the door on the organization, but it's clear. And most people renting space, they're kind of doing a Google search and going, you know, rental space in downtown Toronto. We come up, they don't want to compete with us. They don't want to come into a space and compete in the actual location that they're trying to run their programs either. So that's a really key one. Both it provides good service to your renters anyway, and it makes sure that you're not pulling away from your own programming. Another good policy would be rentals that we would consider high risk or against mission or values. We just don't. So I'll give you an example because it's not really a set, clear-cut written policy, this one. But we won't regularly rent to groups who are looking to conduct like regular weekly or monthly religious services that are like non-Jewish religious services. So it's a blanket policy, but it's really created to ensure that we're not having groups come in whose their mission is to actually convert people to their religion, right? They're a religion that's the case, which is no problem. It's a sensitive topic in the Jewish community. So we're really making sure that we're not pulling away from our membership and really making sure that everyone feels that they belong. So we just have a blanket policy that's why we don't actually allow for those kinds of bookings. Luckily for us, we don't really have the space to do that on a regular basis. So often that answers the question anyway. But our staff who are doing the bookings know that that's not possible. And it's not to say that we don't rent to other religious groups. We do. We have churches and different things that will come in and want to do like a Christmas pageant, for instance. So they can come in and they can rent the theater. We just make sure that we have the communication with them and that they understand what the boundaries are, right? So we have a shared lobby for the theater and the rest of the community center. So if that group comes in at Christmas time and wants to do a Christmas pageant, not a problem. If their set is a nativity scene, knock yourself out. That can be on stage contained into the theater for your audience, but you can't put it in the lobby. So that's another one that we kind of do. And the other kind of policy around rental that we have is that we don't really take rentals that are going to interrupt our day-to-day business. So it must be the season because we've been getting a ton of inquiries around film shoots right now. People wanting to take over our locker rooms or our fitness center. And it's like, I mean, it's a huge part of our business and really what we do as an organization. And, film shoots particularly can bring in a bunch of money in one fell swoop, but they take right over. So we don't actually take that stuff. We consider things that can be done after hours and we're limited, but we turn away a ton of rental opportunity that way because it actually just conflicts way too much with our programming. So really knowing when to say no about things and making sure you have that line in the sand of like, this is actually our priority here, and go from there. So we don't publicly post these policies like we would put our code of conduct on the website, but our booking staff knows what that stuff is. When it comes out, they can clearly communicate that in a way that that the potential renter understands, and that we can communicate that with the rest of the staff here, all the programmers and stuff, so they kind of know that we really have their back and we're not trying to like rent them out of their home to do all of their programming. And having your staff really understand both those mission, the mission that we talked about earlier, and what these policies are is important, because they can kind of like listen between and know what you're up to see when they can make a suggestion, or that when you want to look at, making an exception to one of the policies. So a great example that we had relatively recently, about a year ago, we had an inquiry from Canada Council for the Blind. As part of White Cane Week, they wanted to do an experience expo. Take over our entire gymnasium, set it up kind of like a trade show, do a social and a reception kind of thing in the theater, like big thing, on a Saturday. One of our busiest days in our gymnasium. Lots of pickup basketball happening, lots of other programming happening. So normally we would just say no. But we have a really huge focus on accessibility in the center. So the staff that took the inquiry said, I know that we normally don't do this, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. So took that, brought it to, we have a director of access and inclusion. I'm sure I got her job title wrong. And we went, you know what, this is like too good to pass up. The opportunity is huge. It actually, for a one-day event, for what we might lose in a little bit of programming, the center itself is going to gain huge. So we took it on, and we kind of did a little bit of a, we didn't actually do it as a partnership. We offered them a rate, so we had some rental revenue coming in. We got amazing training from their staff on how to actually deal with an event that has, I mean, never mind a large number of people with various vision abilities. So we got trained on, how to walk somebody through like a tour. Okay, great, we're all going to start on the same wall. We're all going to put our backs here. So this is the direction that you're facing, and to your right is this, and to your left is this. Like, my staff got trained beyond belief just from taking that on. And we got offered, they were so thrilled with us being able to like bend over backwards and make that work. In that case, that we were offered a table. So we were able to promote our Real Abilities Toronto Film Festival, to this crowd. It's like the target market, right? One of them. So it really worked to our benefit to actually really know what the goals are and the objectives are, and knowing when to make an exception to those policies. Okay. Here we'll move on to progress. So one of the most valuable tools that we have at the MNJCC around balancing our programming and our rentals is the process in which we take our bookings. So like I said before, we're an organization that has probably about 6 businesses within a business, and so we're almost maxed out on space. Like, the amount that gets done here in a day just blows my mind sometimes. We have internal programming that's competing with other internal programming. So we really want to make sure that we're best utilizing all of our resources and maximizing the impact that we have, and making sure that we can get enough rental revenue and have enough impact with that we're balancing both. So this process for managing all of that stuff is really key. So I just want to outline that our current process that I will take you through looks nothing like it did when I first started here, because there was no process, I don't think, when I first started here. So that might sound familiar to some of you, especially if we're looking at the question of like, oh, do you actually book space like for your internal stuff? 100% that we do. It's the only way that we can kind of keep track of it. So the way things looked here years ago, from a programming perspective, we may have worked a couple months ahead of time. It was very like knee-jerk reaction to the programming. It was somebody came up with an idea and it's like, let's just do this now. Or an opportunity came up to partner with somebody, or somebody brought something to us and we're like, yes, we need to do this. Oh, it's next week, let's go. So that's kind of what it was looking like. Everything was done last minute. We had a quarterly program guide that came out. So to some degree, we kind of did programming on a quarterly basis. And then we were realizing that this became a problem for the theater. So the theater was mostly doing rentals at the time. And the people coming in wanting to rent were looking to rent like 6 months or more out. And we were leaving them hanging and losing a lot of revenue potential for a space that was sitting empty for programmers who couldn't decide what they wanted to do, just in case they needed to keep it empty. And that might be sounding familiar to some of you guys. So we went, okay, we need to find a balance here for this. How can we manage all of it? So we then started to go, okay, we need to put in, maybe it's a rolling 6 months. So we would release the calendar for 6 months. We'd take all the internal programming. What are you going to do between, this month and this month? Speak now or forever hold your peace. The date that you want might not be there. So everybody would put their stuff in, and then we'd open it up, and then we'd kind of release more and release more and release more, which was starting to work. But we got busier and busier and more popular, and it was no longer a process that was actually serving us. So we had to look to tweak that again. Just going to pause for a second because we've got a comment or a question from Alan. So we adopted a policy of declining rentals with less than 4 months notice. Experience has taught us that clients don't have enough time to promote their shows in less than 4 weeks. Yep, that's for sure. We consider, in the theater, we consider anything less than 4 weeks to be a last minute booking. So like in another space, we would consider a last minute booking like 1 or 2 days ahead of time. For the theater, it's at least 4 weeks. So we very rarely get anything less than that, but it was less than our rentals, and it was more our internal programs that was happening with at the time. Luckily, that is not the case anymore. Okay, great. So I'm just seeing Alan's still typing, so going to start to slide over though, because I'm going to start to get into what our process looks like now. So we now have a bit of an idea of how our process, or lack thereof, looked. So I'm going to walk through some of the basic steps of what our submission process looks like now, current date. It's mostly the same for the theater as it is for the rest of the building, but I'm going to actually walk through this because this is more full building wide. The theater has a couple slight variances to this, but it's mostly the same. So this will allow us to see how we juggle all of the internal needs and fit our renters in there too, and maximize the potential for both. So we basically put together a calendar of programming departments that are outlining all holidays, public holidays, Jewish holidays, any facility closures. We're not closed very often. We close for 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and 1 for Yom Kippur, because we have a synagogue that comes in and holds high holiday services, so we close all other use of the facility then. We've only just this year did a pilot to close on Christmas Day. Because we'd always been open on Christmas Day. It was quieter and quieter, and with costs going up and up, we looked at that and went, okay, we're going to try and see what happens if we close for the day. So now we are, but we outline all of that stuff. We outline registration dates for the coming year, in the sessional date. So when is the spring session going to be held, the start date of that, the end date of that. We put all of that together. We've become a master at this. The Jewish holidays, for those who don't know, are a moving target every year. So the template really has to get looked at. So we put that together. We send it to the programmers well in advance so they know that they need to start thinking about this stuff, right? They're going to be caught in the day-to-day of their current programming. Then they know, yep, we need to kind of do that. So we then communicate. Once that goes out, the programmers are working away. We then communicate to all of our repeat renters as well in advance. So the process for us, I'd love to send that out sooner than it does, and it always sneaks up on me. We send that out probably around January, that calendar gets finalized and sent. For initial submissions that kind of come in, we start taking in about end of February, beginning of March. They know, we also drop hints that this is coming, it's coming, right? So they're working away. And we start taking that stuff. So end of February, beginning of March, we're taking things for the following September to August. So we've just finished. I'll kind of let you know where we are in the process, but that's roughly where we're looking. So we then, calendar goes out, programmers are working away, getting their submissions ready, figuring out what they need, what they're going to be doing for the year, and then we communicate with our repeat annual renters. So we have a bunch of renters who come in and they've been with us for years. They come in and they book once a week or once a month. They have a really regular schedule. So we kind of communicate to them, we're getting ready to take all of our internal stuff. Are you interested in coming back next year? First of all, right? A good way to touch base. How are things going now? Are you planning on doing more of the same next year? And, you know, does your schedule look the same? Is the room sufficient for what you're using? And then we pencil that stuff in. We do not confirm it with anybody. We put it in so we're aware that we would ultimately like to make this happen. Laura, do you have a process for evaluating renter satisfaction with the space? I'm going to table that right now, and we'll get back to that. Can you say that one for the end, actually, Laura? And so, yeah, so I'm going to roll it back for a second. So we send the calendar out, programmers work away, we communicate with our repeat renters to see if they're interested in coming back, and then we pencil those bookings in. So nothing is confirmed, nothing is solidified. The client knows that it's simply, we're going to put them on hold because we want to try to give you your first option if we can. Okay, and they know that our internal programming takes priority. So those are put in as placeholders, and then we kind of move on. So we let the renters know. We talked about that. I'm getting lost in my own system. Okay, I talked about that. Great. So penciling in the dates. Yeah, and then we take our large special events that happen in the building. For us, many of these fall around holiday celebrations. These are events like Family Day programming that takes over most of the building. We do a big Hanukkah event that takes over the gym and a bunch of our programming spaces. These are things that are not done, you know, regularly throughout the year. They're scattered. They're different dates. We put those in first because they actually have a big impact on missed dates for regular scheduled programs. So anything that we do weekly are going to get interrupted by one of these special events that are going to take priority. So we always like to get those in first. So we have a deadline for that, and that stuff all comes in. We put it in the booking system while everybody's still working away on their regular, their regular program. Then we fast forward to, I don't know, it's about a week or so later. We then take the internal programs and we get those booked in. So all the regularly scheduled stuff. So the karate class that's happening every week, the Hebrew classes that are like, 8 sessions long that start for this session and then this session and all of that stuff. So all that stuff gets submitted in. That leaves our booking coordinators super duper busy. So they start plugging all of that stuff into the calendar for our following fiscal/programming year. And once that deadline hits, we've had to get really solid about that deadline is a deadline. So if anybody's late, they know ahead of time that they're going to be late, our internal programmers. They can communicate and sort of like negotiate it, right? I'm waiting on this. Is there any way to get this 2 days later? We kind of assess the process. If it's possible and isn't going to have an impact on it, no problem, we'll do it. Otherwise, the deadline is the deadline. So once that deadline hits, if there's anything that comes in internally late, we say, thank you, we're going to take this, but we're going to actually have to put this aside until we're done the process. Because our process in that work back schedule is so tight. We actually work it back from registration dates and when our biannual program guides come out. So if we know that our guide has to be, on doorsteps by such and such a date in advance of like an August registration date for the fall, we move backwards from there. So we don't have much space. Otherwise, we start to encroach on marketing deadlines, and those guys are already pushing it around here, to say the least. Okay, so that's what we do. So we set that stuff aside, and people know. We had pushback when we first started to do that because they were used to just, well, everybody will accommodate me, and it's going to be late. Yeah, it's going to be late, and you're gonna end up missing out because we have a process that works now, and you're going to actually start impacting and affecting everybody else. So we set those aside. Okay, great. And then we move into the probably actually the meatiest part of the process, which is resolving conflicts for us anyway, because we're kind of managing so many things and it's so busy. So our booking coordinators put everything in the system. They see what's overlapping. They start to look at, okay, is this a priority program? Because some of them can't be moved. So we run an after-school program that's licensed. There's not much around that. That has to be priority. So anything that's conflicting with that, unless it's supplemental programming that they do, if it's the key spaces that they have to run out of, the licensed spaces, we're like, sorry, no, you can't do that then. And then they go from there. So they'll start to move that around. They start to have the conversations with the programmers. So they'll take stuff to them and say, okay, great. So this isn't possible, but this is. Or asking the questions, do you have flexibility about what space that you're in? Or can your time shift to this? And they start to ask those questions and they have a dialogue back and forth. So anything that they can kind of address at that stage, they address it. Then they kind of look, if it's down to kind of competing of two different programs, it's all internal stuff at this point. They look and say, okay, great. So you need this and you need this. Sometimes they need somebody to make a judgment call. That's really great. That's when the mandate comes back in really well, right? What's actually serving us best, what's bringing in, what's having the most impact, that kind of thing. And we kind of go from there. So we kind of hash that stuff out. All the while, there's these external placeholders in the system. So we start to, now that we've had the conversations particularly around what difference that revenue makes, we start to ask those questions. Do you have flexibility? Could you shift this to accommodate this? And so we do our best to preserve that time, and we actually do a pretty good job. I don't know how my staff actually juggles it, to be honest. They're really the experts at this. But we somehow manage to kind of make that all work. So communication at this stage in the game is the most important. So once all those conflicts are sorted out, we have a date where we lock that internal programming. We send out the confirmation sheets. These guys know that they can start putting their marketing materials together because those are the dates and the times that they have, and they go from there. So then we go back to all those external rentals that had placeholders. And we then start to have the conversations. This is now what's available. Are you ready to confirm? We lock in their schedules. We start adding in anything else. We contract them. All that stuff is wonderful and good. The calendar is basically then open. Once the internal programmers have got their confirmations and that part of the process is done, it's open business. Now, we can have more internal programs come in. That's when we go back to the late in the game submissions and we start to see what space we do have for them, and all the while putting in all those external renters and locking that stuff in. Yeah, and so we figure out alternate dates, we get all them in, and we basically go from there. Yeah, and so yeah, opening up the calendar for all the other bookings. So before I move on from this, I'll ask if there's any specific questions to the process or anything like that. Mary Ann, we host a wedding that wants to book the space sometimes 2 years ahead. In your process, I do not see how you can fit it in. Ah, great. So in our booking system, Mary Ann, we have a status called unconfirmed holds. We'll take those as far out as possible. And we always communicate. We had this a while ago with a bar mitzvah, actually, because if you think weddings sometimes can be high maintenance, you have not hosted a bar mitzvah before. So we'll take them, and we actually our process is our process. So it's being confident and not being afraid to have to turn things away, right? We are not, and our mission here is not to be that kind of facility, right? We're not a banquet hall. We would be doing, our focus would be very, very different. So we say to people, we can absolutely place a hold for you. And this is the date by which we can get back to you to tell you whether or not we can confirm it. If that works for them, they'll leave the hold. And if it doesn't, they'll start to look elsewhere. But we don't string them along. We don't not tell them, and it's just bad customer service, right? They can then choose. If it works for them to wait, they will. And if it doesn't, then they won't. I hope that answers your question. Marianne says that they limit to certain weekends in limited number. Yeah, that's absolutely a way that you can do that too, is you can say, you know, we know these are the busy times for this, so we're not going to take any of our own programming, and we're just going to dedicate it to that and fill it. Yeah. Okay. Alan, we will only take weddings during the spring and summer when our performing arts activities are low. Yeah, absolutely. We've determined that we have difficult meeting expectations in our priority to serve the performing arts. 100%, yeah. All of this stuff is really valid, right? You want to look at the kinds of things you're doing when. It's a bit of a tangent, it's not actually in here, but we do that with our partners. We were having a hard time a while ago that people kept on wanting to come and partner with us in the theater, which was code for I want a discount. It wasn't the same thing, right? Discounts and partners are not the same. So we actually had to put together a whole partnership process and program, and we wouldn't take any sort of partnership less than, you know, however many months ahead of time and all of that kind of stuff. And it had to be something that was going to mutually benefit both parties, and people had to outline it. But we had times of year that we would not take a partnership. Not a partnership that was like a discounted rate partnership, right? Somebody who was if it worked out for a promotional partnership, 100% we would do it. But, you know, we could rent May out 5 times over. We don't take on that level of partnership unless it's so aligned with our mission that it actually gets taken on kind of like an internal program, like our own programming. Then we'll make exceptions to it, but otherwise we just say it's just blackout period. We don't do it. In the same way that if you know that you have a couple of months that are like crazy, like we have crazy high rental potential, and that's going to pay for all the other stuff you do all year long, then, you know, as an organization, you just make a choice and say, that's the priority at this time. And then this is the priority at this time. So you get to pick and choose and customize that for what works for your organization. Do you have agreed upon policies for priority? So rental versus programming, like who has first dibs? Can programming bump a rental? We're really, we run off of, once you're confirmed around here, you're confirmed. We don't leave, both for internal and for external stuff, we don't leave loose holds on the books for very long, unless it's in that period that we can't actually release those dates yet. So yeah, with our external rentals, for instance, somebody comes in, they put an inquiry on the theater, they fill out a form, we put a hold on it. They have 2 weeks, once they've received the estimate, the cost estimate, to make a decision. So if they're ready to move on and they want to confirm, we start to prep contracts and the first deposit invoice. We get that stuff out, they sign, they pay, they're locked in, period. They're actually on the hook for the whole thing. They only have to pay a deposit of 50%, but contractually they're actually obligated for that whole thing. That works for us in the theater. It doesn't work everywhere. Like, it wouldn't work everywhere for that, but it's how we do it. And once they're locked in, it doesn't matter what internal program wants to take that space. They can't. We have promised it to somebody else. We've worked really hard to gain a reputation that people want to keep coming back. And we do that. I'm really just conscious of time right now, and I'm running out, so I gotta keep moving. Okay, great. Other tools and tips. This is actually going to be We're going to fly through this. And Alex says it's okay. Phew, thank goodness. I thought we were going to be done early. So some other tools that you can use other than using your process and your policies and your bringing back to your mandate. Taking your programming on the road. If you're running at a space like we are, why the heck not start to program outside of your building? So we do have some partnered events. It's a great way to actually get your brand outside of your walls too. So we have a couple of, like, we've done some pop-up yoga classes at like a local farmer's market. It really helps to promote our fitness center. And, you know, it's something that they can do because we're filled to the gills. We also have, we have like a sort of partnered sort of groove component. It's part of our Jewish Life programming. That they do little pop-ups at parks, and they do it, it's in partnership with a number of different organizations, and they just take that programming out on the road. So we're starting to look more and more of that, and we're looking at it as part of our strategic plan of how can we actually do more of that, right? We don't actually have to limit the programming, but we just have to find space to do it. We don't have it here, go elsewhere. We have a great example of a JCC somewhere in the States, actually, who owned their own building and realized that they were not able to like keep up with it from a financial perspective, that they actually were further ahead, that they sold the building because they, as a center, it was their programming was who they were. It wasn't their actual facility. So they sold their facility and they took all their programming to different places, not all the same place, and they just like widespread, and it actually apparently just blew up. Like what they were doing was like, it got huge, and it really worked for them. I don't know that it would work for us here, but there's, you know, definitely you want to look outside of the box. So you can always take that out on the road. Curated rentals. You can go after who you want to rent to, right? If you're finding you're taking on stuff that is outside of your mission and what you're aligned with, just go after the stuff that you want to be doing, right? If, I don't know, you might go after film festivals if you have the capacity to do that, because that's more in keeping with what you're doing than weddings, right? Or whatever that is. You got to know your space, and you've got to know what you're good at doing, what's going to give you the most bang for your buck too. So if something is going to be, takes a lot of work from a rental perspective, you might want to go for the little work, high reward kind of thing. That's why there's nothing wrong. I know that when Alex and I were chatting before, we were talking about, what was it? Not AGMs, like other kind of corporate events and that kind of thing. And listen, if it's simple and walk in and out, they've got a ton of money to spend. You can actually just know that why you're doing that is because you need the money and it's quick and it's fast. You get a lot of bang for your buck, then take it. And if it's a lot of work and doesn't bring in that much, you might sit there and say, you know what, we don't do that, and it's okay. You can communicate that and just say, you know, don't be apologetic about it. This is what we do and this is what we don't do. Thank you. Have a good day, kind of thing. So that's curated rentals. You can implement express bookings. It's a process that we're starting to put in. We've kind of borrowed the idea from what the Fringe Festival Lab was here, which is if we have empty space at the last minute, we have a quick system to process as is space. You want space, we can give you a discount on it. We can fill it. We can make extra work or extra revenue for little work. So that's another way to do it. The biggest thing that we probably take on is partnerships and having some of those rentals actually turn into partners. So we have a couple of really great examples. One of them is a past event, and one of them is one coming up. So Ahuri Theater had brought in a production of What Dream It Was. It was an interactive, all abilities show, very Midsummer Night's Dream-esque. It was phenomenal. They came to us wanting to rent the theater. They could not afford the theater regular rates as it was. We sat down, we had lots of conversations with them. We brought in our director of access and inclusion, kind of looking at all of this stuff and went, this is amazing. We ended up coming up with a partnership that we hosted within the community center in one of our rooms. We gave them free space to conduct the workshops to actually help create the actual production. And then we did a discounted rate on the theater. And it was so, like, it fulfilled on our mandate, like, 3 times over. And just what we created, we had tons of like media attention with it and everything else, and it was just like, it was such a perfect partnership. So that was one of the ways that we kind of translated a rental potential that we would have actually lost. We still gained some rental revenue off of it, but man, like the partnership option there was huge. Push Pull Dance is a regular rental in our theater. They come in, they rent 1 week a year, every year, done it for years, and they were looking to expand out into doing more relaxed performances, and it's a focus that we're trying to get tackle a lot more here and do that more here. So they're paying their regular week, they're still coming in, they're paying full freight, they're doing their regular thing, and then they have a separate booking. It's not even within that week, it's like at a different time, like a month or so before, and they're going to do a relaxed performance, and they're doing it in co-presentation with us. So they're still paying a bit for the space, and they're paying for all the labor and everything, and we're helping push it. You know, you can see on the slide there, there's like the Real Abilities Film Festival logo on there, which is run by our facility. Like we facilitate that, and you know, it's working really well, and it helps us, you know, promote and encourage people to be doing more and more relaxed performances, and it gives us an option to actually do a little bit of outreach and teach our clients about what that looks like and how they can bring in a whole new audience by doing relaxed performances. So yeah, that's partnership is a really good way to actually take those rentals and leverage them. Okay, so I lost track of where we are with questions. Is there any more questions? Do we have time for them?
Thank you so much, Angie. That was awesome. And yes, we can take a couple more. I did want to point out that Laura earlier did have a question that we said we would get to at the end, and that was, do you have a process for evaluating renter satisfaction with the space, booking process, etc.?
Gotcha. Yeah, so we don't, we're kind of working on a bit of a more formalized like survey. We don't actually have it at present. We have regular touch points. We regularly communicate with our renters, and we try to check in as we go. So it's, for us, it's more of an informal process, but we do have a really huge retention rate for our rentals. So it kind of, and referral rate. So it tells me we're doing something right.
Thank you. And I think Roxanne is where we are. So she says, for our situation in museum, we would have to include rentals in the museum's mandate and mission in order to make it as much of a priority as programming. So for example, at the present time, our programming department can only, oh, sorry, we're scrolling up, put our theater on hold for 10 potential dates for one possible lecture, and they are not flexible to release any dates just in case their presenter changes their mind. Our biggest block to more rentals are our internal programs. Angie, we kind of talked about this a bit.
Yeah. Ours too sometimes. Yeah. How to make it, yeah, it's getting, it sounds like there just needs to be, as an organization, really just getting aligned with it sounds like silos, maybe, Roxanne. I don't know if that's what you guys are dealing with. We're slowly breaking them down here. That we've been very much working in individual silos. Like I said, right, these businesses within a business, without much thought about everybody else, and it becomes, you know, fighting and vying for space and resources. And it's really us getting on the same page and understanding what each other is doing and opening that dialogue. So maybe it's just a matter of a conversation to have everybody understand the challenges on both sides, and it may be that there's a different solution that you guys haven't actually come up with yet that will actually better serve both areas. I don't know if that helps you or not.
We have Nicholas. Do you use standardized forms for bookings internally and externally, or is it done more organically on email on a face-to-face basis?
No, we have standardized forms, otherwise we'll lose half of them. It used to be, I think it used to be a little bit more organically, and we got too busy. So we've been adjusting our structures as we go. And listen, right now it's nothing fancy. I'll be honest with you. We're looking to try to digitalize that a little bit more to make it more efficient for us. But we do have a standard way, and we will take back to both internally and externally and saying, thank you for the inquiry. I need you to fill it out in this form. It has us be able to give more of a guarantee that we don't mess something up in the process.
Erin, I think this is our last question for now. Erin is asking, which booking system are you using?
We use EventPro as our booking system. We've been pretty happy with it. You can manage multiple venues within that. You can do invoicing out of it. Quite a lot of reporting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Angie. I think this is where we have to wrap it up, but you've included your email there. And so if anybody else has any outstanding questions to ask Angie, please do feel free to email her. What a fantastic resource you are, Angie. Thank you so much for your presentation today. It's definitely a topic that has been very top of mind for many creative spaces in Ontario. And so it's great to have some time to really dive into it. And I think learning about how the Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center and Algreen Theatre have tackled it over the years is a great learning for everyone who has a rentals program right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the opportunity for letting us share what we do. We love it.
We do too. It's awesome. Thank you. Space Finder. So we were talking about booking systems. Space Finder is there for you as well. It's a free resource. It's a community source tool. It's available in 8 Ontario communities and 3 provincial communities. On this system, you can integrate your calendar. You can take payments right through the system as well. And just it's a free way to promote your space rental. So I encourage you, if you're a creative space who's not listed on here or has listed and has forgotten about their listing, go back and update it or list on the site. It is free, and we want your space on there and to help you build up your promotion around your spaces. So please visit spacewanderincanada.ca to learn more. And then lastly, I would like to thank our funders, the Government of Canada, specifically the Department of Canadian Heritage, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and the Ontario Arts Council for their support for the learning series, as well as our partners at Work and Culture for helping us build it. So I just want to say a thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and I'll be sending out that recording and link to the recording, the transcript, and the slides for your resources and the evaluations, which I encourage you to complete as well. Thank you, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.